Thank y'all so much for being here again this morning, and we're excited to continue diving into some of the stuff about preparing for school. If you didn't get one of these booklets, there are some here on the front row if you'd like to grab one. They don't go exactly with some of the content that we're going through, but it is supplemental and hopefully a benefit to the conversation as well. And before we dive in, I would like to make one more plug, and if you'll mark your calendars for October the 16th, that is going to be our rescheduled day for the Road Family Conference, which we were supposed to have in January. So we're going to be able to have that in October, which we're very excited about. And Scott McDowell, who's the president at Lubbock Christian, is going to be our keynote speaker this year, and I've got to know him a little bit, and I think he's going to do a great job for us. So we hope you'll be able to be here with us that day. But we'd like to begin with a scripture for consideration, and one that always kind of is good and a good reminder when we're approaching scripture about all the blessings that it can provide us. And that's from 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. And it says, "All scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete and equipped for every good work." And I know that describes some of the things that we hope will come out of our parenting as well, that our kids will be equipped for good work and good work in God, and that we have a role to teach, to bring reproof, correction, and ultimately training in righteousness. And so we hope that our goals will always be aligned with kingdom goals and seek to be kingdom parents. And so we are going to kind of pick up a little bit where we left off last time. We had some good descriptions about what it means to be a friend and what it is like to live in a world that has some values that are potentially different than ours, and what does it look like to be people who live for Jesus in our schools and in our homes. And so we're going to be talking about social skills a little bit this morning. We might say, well, are social skills a spiritual thing? Does it matter how we interact socially? And I think it absolutely does. When Jesus is asked, what is the greatest command? The scribes came to him seeking to ask him this question: which commandment is the most important of all? Jesus answered, the most important is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And there is no greater commandment than these." And so what does it look like to love our neighbor as ourselves? Well, it definitely means that we're going to be relational, and we're going to be social beings who seek to glorify God socially. And so I'd like to kick it off with our panel. We're blessed to be joined by the West and the Youngs again with a question about social interaction. And so the prompt: human beings are designed to live in relationships. What do you think are some important lessons about social interactions that kids need to learn in this stage? Any thoughts?
So something that in our home that we have really tried to teach the kids at this age, at the young age, starting, basically since birth, well, probably around 2, is self-control. And self-control is kind of like the key to everything. In school, as they start coming into kindergarten, it takes self-control to be kind. And I tell my third graders all the time, I say, it's not hard to be kind, because a lot of times all it means is that you've got to be quiet and you've got to say or do nothing. Because a lot of times when you're not being kind, you're doing something or you're saying something. And so I tell them, I say self-control is when you can stop yourself from doing something that you want to do and thinking before you act. And so the social things that these kids need to learn would be kind, which is going to take self-control, be a good listener, which also takes self-control. And we also need to be teaching them empathy, so that they just start talking to them, because empathy does not come into a later stage in growth, but talking to them about how would this kid feel if you kick them Or how would this kid feel if you take the swing from them? And talking about that all the time and making them put it into words on how that kid would feel so that they start realizing that others have feelings as well. So we also are big on teaching our kids that life is not fair. And if you expect it to be fair, you're going to be disappointed. And so I loved any situation when they were young where our kids were getting the bad end of the stick. If they were at the playground and someone was being mean to them, I loved it because I was able to pull my kids right and say, hey, this kid is being mean. What are your options? What can you do? And we used it, and I never wanted to go to that kid and be like, stop being mean to my kid, because I wanted my kids to be able to grow and learn from that. So use those opportunities to teach your kids what are their options as a Christian.
Yeah, and I also, it's important to really kind of understand the personality of your kids. And again, as we're learning, they're all different. My oldest is very much an introvert, and really challenging him to actually interact with others and, to learn how to, get out of your comfort zone. And it was a challenge for him. Now you contrast him with Jeremiah, who is extrovert extraordinaire and very confident and really trying to rein in some of that and, socially getting him to, again, have some empathy, consider not everyone is as animated as you are. And I'm the greatest. And anyway, so just really trying to instill in him a sense of humility and, really trying to strike that balance of, yes, we want you to be confident, but we want you to be considerate of others and, that other people, may think differently, do things differently, and that's okay. And so really trying to teach him how to, use his gifts, but to, just not be so extreme.
And I think also socially, as you mentioned, Nicole, he's starting to realize that, kids are different. They have different personalities. They have different beliefs, different thoughts, things that are more important to them may not be so important to him. But as you read earlier, Matt, in that verse, loving God first and learning to love your neighbor as yourself. And we always talk to Jeremiah about who your neighbor is, and he really understands that every kid in his class is his neighbor. So really helping him to understand, and he's kind of doing this on his own. He's finding out that although kids are different, I still should have a relationship and love them. Kids will have their close circle of friends. But as Nicole and I were talking, when he has a birthday party, he wants to invite every kid in his class, which we think, hey, that's great. You're not excluding anyone who's different than you, who looks different than you, acts or talks differently. So I think just really developing the social skills where, you're going to maintain who you are, but at the same time, who you are is the person who loves your neighbor, your other classmates, as you do yourself. It's a difficult thing for us to do as adults, and I think it's really important that we really try to instill that in our kids as they are going into school, into the school years.
I mean, I know one thing I'm having to be mindful of in this stage, and I'm sure it will go up more and more, but just how often we'll come back from a social event and I find my first conversation piece being talking bad about somebody that was at that social event, and it's like, I feel like, my kids or Hudson's watching how we, describe the event that we just came from, like, what was that like, and what lessons do our kids pick up from watching our social interactions as well. But when we think about, some of the benefits of social skills, and you guys already hit on a couple of these, but, obviously understanding people. And, I think that's something that we're all constantly growing towards, better understanding people, but there is some developmental, connection to this life stage. One important consequence of social learning for the young is that he or she acquires the ability to understand the mental processes in others, Building on infancy, children in the play years are able to generate an increasingly sophisticated theory of mind, knowing that others have thoughts, beliefs, preferences, and desires, and this can have immediate and positive implications in terms of empathy. And so it is a process, but it's a process that begins fairly, starts around kindergarten to 7. Decision making is another thing connected with social skills, how we empower our kids to interact with others. And the last is definitely most importantly, that loving others, and what does it really look like to love those that are hard to love. The fundamental human question we often think is to be or not to be, but the cardinal question that marks and measures our humanity is to love or not to love. We love in order to be and become who we are. And so, the more that we, move from, a purely kind of objective rendering of human interactions to one that requires some risk and enters into some love, it's really important for our growth and development. So it kind of leads us to the corollary there. If the love of others is connected to the love of self, how do we instill within our kids a healthy love for themselves? Any thoughts on this one?
I'll go ahead and start. So probably, I started particularly in our prayers at night. That's one of the things that we pray for, is that Jeremiah knows that he's made in the image of God, and that he starts to learn and ask and consider what God's purpose is for him. And, it's strange how, we're in just different environments, different circumstances. And, this past 18 months has been a little bit of a challenge. Jeremiah he's always the only brown kid. And so just recently, we had a conversation about, him really not thinking he should be brown. And so, my focus is now really trying to kind of shift from a more kind of earthly thinking about it, and then shift to get back to, God made us all, and God created us all in his image, and in God's image, we're all God's people. And so brown kid or not, God created, he didn't make any mistakes when he created you, and he created you the way that he created you. So that's really been our emphasis this summer, is just showing him, there have been some great contributions from brown people. And so really shifting the focus to really loving everything about yourself. And so, again, just always anchoring it into the fact that he was created in God's image, and he's got to love himself, because, God didn't make a mistake when he made you, and he made you the way, that you are. And, just, again, kind of getting him outside of the earthly way, and we're never going to come out of that. And so within this framework, just shifting the attention to just kind of things at a spiritual level, and getting him to appreciate that.
Kind of to add on to that is teaching our kids that they are good enough. Like, no matter what, they might not be perfect, they might not be the best, they might not be the most beautiful, but they are good enough no matter what. And kind of just being real with your kids that, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things that you're not proud of. You're going to do things that disappoint us. You're going to do things that disappoint yourself. But that God loves you anyways, and I love you anyways. And for them to realize that it's okay to love themselves even if they're not perfect, because studies have actually shown that the kids who don't love themselves, it's typically linked back to they don't feel good enough, or they're disappointed in things about their lives. And so I think the more we can talk to our kids about the disappointments and the things that aren't perfect in our lives and the mistakes that we make, and the more we get used to talking about that and seeing that it's actually okay, that I can admit I've done something wrong, or I can admit that I'm not happy about this, but I've told it to my parents and they still love me, and God still loves me. And just learning that no matter what they've done, they're still good enough. And I think that's something that these kids need to learn, because a lot of times our society, we do focus on the perfect people, or the people who we think are perfect and have the perfect lives. And they see that and they think that that's real, and it's not real. And so just kind of helping our kids realize that those things are just perceptions, that it's not real, and what reality actually looks like, and reality is never perfect. And that's okay, because it's still good enough.
One of the things that we're trying to incorporate into the language a lot with the older kids, and Brene Brown has done a lot of helpful research recently on shame, but it's that, the difference between guilt and shame, the idea that I did something bad versus I am bad. And, our culture has definitely shifted towards kind of a shame emphasis culture. If you do something that is going to stick with you for life, is kind of what it seems like is a trend, but that's not a biblical trend, and it's not a healthy developmental trend either. And so the earlier we can begin instilling, healthy understanding of, ourselves in relation to our mistakes as well, is really, really important. And that's part of what our kind of last section, and we want to have time for some questions because we didn't get to that much last week. But we do want to talk about instilling courage in our kids, because it is a world that does require courage. And Gary Chapman, who, if you're familiar with the 5 Love Languages, it's a great resource, and 5 Love Languages for Kids is a really helpful book. But he gets back to the basics here, that the word encourage means to instill courage, right? And so, we're seeking to be advocates for our kids. So how do we instill our kids with courage? What are some aspects of this life stage that require courage?
Is that a notification for me to speak? I really like that quote that was up there. To encourage means to instill courage. So I believe that every time that we have an opportunity to encourage our kids, and as Sarah mentioned, you love it when something bad happens, those are teachable moments. And those are the times that we can really take the opportunity to encourage our children and instill that courage in them, so that they know and they understand that this is the right thing to do. This is the way to handle it. A bad situation happened, but I've been encouraged by my parents that it was a bad situation, but there is good that can come out of it, so that I know the next time something like this happens, I have the courage and the wherewithal to stand up for what's right. And I just believe that those moments are so precious. When bad things happen to our kids, they turn into teachable moments and opportunities for us to encourage our children and instill the courage in them going forward.
And add on to that, it's funny because at this stage, you get to really help with all the bad situations. Your kids typically come to you, or you see them, because when I would go on play dates, I would watch and listen to everything, because I wanted to, I'd kind of like consider myself a spy. Like, ooh, I'm going to see how my kids are acting, and I'm going to bust them. But as they get older, they're not going to let you help as much with their situations. And you might not even know about them or be aware of them as much, because they do go off to school, they do stop talking to you. But take as much time as you can, because I would say up until even 5th grade-ish, you really get to help your kids with those situations that don't go great, and use that opportunity to really be involved in helping them figure out what is the best solution for them. But back to the courage.
Oh, okay. So I think some of the things we've done is we've looked at, obviously biblical characters and learned from them, but I think the biggest thing at that age, for example, is just practicing as much as you can for examples of courage. So, for example, Eli doesn't do well interacting with people. He's very much shy, and so some small piece of courage would just go in talking to somebody, looking at them in the eye, shaking their hand, and just the more you can practice those small things that seem small, but that will be helpful when the big thing comes, because they'll have already practiced courage and understand it. So anytime you can practice something, small wins will equal big wins down the road, for sure.
And I think, one of the other, aspects of church life that, involves some courage, and this is one of the, kind of hard things of going to a big church is seeking that intergenerational action, and that takes some intentionality on the part of parents too, to have your kids walk up with you to some older folks and, get to know some people of all ages. That's one of the, benefits of going to a small church, and I think that's something that we have to work really hard to do here, is to create those relationships that require us to get out of our comfort zone. But the parent and the encourager is committed to understanding the purpose of struggle, right? Resisting the temptation to fix our kids' problems, to embrace the importance of listening, and those are two key themes that Sarah brought out there. Listening is the most vital aspect of effective communication, serves as a window into the mind and the heart of the child, an indispensable chance to get right to the core of the child's needs and growth potential with a minimum of trial and error. And this last takeaway, we're called to model courageous courage and discipleship for our kids. And this is, something that, gets more and more true as they get older, but kids have an amazing fake detector, right? And it's already, definitely coming into form by the time they come to elementary school. They value, they value authenticity, and that's always a difficult line to walk as role models, but kids know when things aren't going the way that they look on the surface, for sure. And so, kind of our last question before we try to have some dialogue and interaction. Life can be busy, stressful, and complicated. How do you, as parents, remain committed to growing in your discipleship?
So I do think that's a big one. For example, recently the kids stayed at home and drank a nasty kale smoothie and ate really healthy, and Sarah and I went out and ate Mexican food. And it was interesting because, what we're teaching them is to eat healthy until 18, and then once you're a mom and dad or whatever, you can kind of eat differently, and that's not really the message we're trying to give. But I do think it's very true that your actions and how they look at you, they'll catch on very quickly. So I have, thankfully, 2 of my kids are now baptized, and so I've been trying to talk to them about reading the Bible on their own, and they asked me if I'm reading the Bible on my own, and so I showed them on my phone. I have a reminder, 7 a.m. to read and pray, and so I showed Eli that, and that kind of hit home for him. But it is a simple concept to understand that is extremely hard to do, that I think that as a parent you really do need to lead them so that they can see that it's dad and mom doing these things as well. So it's hard for sure.
And that's something I hear Blake do with the kids is like he talks to him, he says, I've got to figure out when I'm going to read the Bible, but he tells the kids, he says, you've got to figure out when it can fit for you to read the Bible this day, because he could make them sit down. We could make them sit down like we do their guitar and their homework and their reading. But if they only get used to reading the Bible or studying when we've told them to sit down and do it, then it does concern me for when they're grown as adults. So now we're having the conversations of, you need to find time and you need to budget your time and figure that out on your own, because this is your walk. It's not my walk. It's not me making you do it. And, I'm usually busy cleaning, but having those conversations with the kids and just reminding them that it's got to be their thing and they need to find time to do that. And have that talk daily, because they're not great at it yet, but hopefully if we continue the talk that they will, it'll get instilled that I've got to do this, not dad's got to do this.
And, to add on to that, Sarah, as I mentioned last week, I only became a Christian, a few 10, 12 years ago. And so I remember as a new Christian being so diligent about, learning as much as I could, studying as much as I could. And then I kind of hit a point where I stopped growing spiritually. And so for me as a parent, recognizing that I need to continue to grow in my discipleship and, being open to sharing, my process with the kids. And, we have the benefit of having, older Christians and just listening to them about their experience, when they went off to college and kind of seeing other, and now I'm speaking about the one who went to a Christian school. Everyone's here, say they're Christians, but they may not all act the same, or they may see things differently. And so again, that was another mental point for me to check. Again, am I continuing to model discipleship for Jeremiah so that, you never get to a point even as an adult where you're done. And so as an adult now, since we've come to McDermott, that spiritual maturation has continued. And, really recognizing, wow, I've missed some important things. And really, it's only been in the last couple of years that, through Wes's teaching, being able to incorporate that into my day-to-day life, recognizing even, the message from this morning, we live in an upside-down world. And so me being able to share my own growth, maturation, going against, things of the culture, and it can be hard because, I have to go to work and I have to perform well, but, that doesn't make me great. And being able to say that, to the young growing Christian, you're going to have to go to that same process. And then to the older kids, you guys are going to have to find your own faith, and you're going to have to continue to grow spiritually and figure out what is it going to take to help you along your process. And so it doesn't stop. And so, and I am authentically excited about that. And so, I hope that he sees that this is something that is genuinely important to me, and to be able to share through the struggles, how I've grown spiritually through that. And because of that struggle that God just brought me through, when the next one comes, and it will, I have the faith that he's going to get me through that as well.
Absolutely. I think we were talking to someone here at church a few months back, and she was saying she went home to help with her parents, and she got up early one morning because her mom was up, and she saw her reading her Bible, and she said, hey, Mom, how long have you been doing that? Getting up early and reading your Bible. And she's like, I did this the whole time that you guys were kids. And she said, Mom, I wish we knew that, and, it's just a simple moment of sometimes finding that, we have those habits that, are good, but, we're all taught, they don't do things for people to see, do them, in private. But when it comes to our kids, the ways that, we can model and invite them into that are really healthy and important to remember. So we do want to take a little bit of time for some questions. Anybody have anything that, yeah, you had a question from last week.
So something with us is our kids, our neighborhood is a very close-knit neighborhood. We all go to school together. Everybody knows everybody. It's not a huge neighborhood, but we kind of stand out because we don't go to the parties and things like that. So that's one thing that we talk to our kids about now is we tell them, we say, hey, they'll know that their friend, I'll just use Parker. Parker's parents have parties, and we've been invited, but we don't ever go. And our son, as he got older, would ask why we didn't go, and we'd say, well, to be honest, it's not going to really be fun for us. We can go and we can chat with people, but then everyone's going to be drunk, and we're going to end up probably going home early. And so to be honest, we would rather just kind of do our own thing as our family because we enjoy our family. And it doesn't mean we're not friends with these people. Would never say that we're not their friends, but we definitely don't do the hanging out. And we just have talked to them since they were little that we are different. We're going to be different, and sometimes it's hard to be different, and sometimes it's not fun to be different. And our oldest one is pretty good at it. I mean, I think I told the day at the library, the boys were acting up and he went and sat by himself because he did not want to get in trouble. But just talking to him and putting them in situations and letting them see that you're different than the other adults, you're different than the other parents, and just seeing that and talking about it as much as possible. It's a hard one because I don't like to be different either, to be honest. I tell my kids that I don't mind being different, but to be honest, I don't really like being different. So it's kind of like a lie, but just trying to get them to where they're at least comfortable with that part of being different and being confident enough. And we also tell our kids that we remind Grayson all the time that you are not going to be friends with these middle school kids your entire life. You're not going to be friends with your high school friends probably your entire life. I do have a couple. I'm from a small town, but for the most part, your life is going to start when you go off to college and you make those good lifelong Christian friends or even your friends from church. And just realizing and putting in perspective, which is hard for these kids, that middle school and high school are a very short fragment of your life. If you can just survive it, do the right thing, then it will be okay in the end. But, I mean, it's a very difficult one.
So I'll just add on this real quick. So one specific example is group text. We're not fans of that at all. Boys are dumb, and you get 12 of them on there, and one tries to one-up each other. And so that's one thing that is a hard thing for him to say, that he'll get invited for a group text, and then he'll remove himself often. And then we'll try to use those as sometimes he'll stay on for a little bit and see the nonsense happening, and that's why we'll say, hey, you need to remove yourself and you're going to be different. So it's simple things like that everything is tied into what we want him to be. And so to be that and to give himself the best opportunity to be who he wants to be and hopefully tries to be, you got to kind of remove yourself when that's not those other people's goals. And so group text has been a big conversation in our house, and that's a big thing, right? I mean, he hasn't had a phone long, and you get him onto that, and it's an attractive thing to be, and you want to be a part of those groups, and so we've asked him to not be, and he's so far gone along with it.
And specifically on that, because you're probably thinking, oh, school friends, but it's actually his group. He's not allowed to text with school friends. It's actually church friends. So these group chats that we're referring to are group chats, and the first one was called the 8th grade cool kids. And so I just had a conversation with him, and I'm like, Grayson, how do you think that makes the kids who aren't on this group chat feel? And that's kind of sad that, why can't it just be called 8th grade? And so just getting him to kind of think about it. And then eventually someone posted a camp picture, and they started making fun of one of the kids in the picture who's not in the 8th grade. He's a 7th grader. And we are sort of friends with this kid. And I said, Grayson, I was like, because I read all his text. And I'm like, that's not nice. He's not here to defend himself, and B, it's just not nice. And so he decided on his own to say, you guys need to stop being rude to so-and-so. And then he left the group chat immediately, he removed himself. So the very next thing that's shown is Grayson has been removed from this group chat or something. And this has happened 3 times. 3 times he's been added to these group chats and had to remove himself. And so now the current situation is, the 8th graders are going to the movies tomorrow. Well, guess what? Grayson didn't know about it because he's not on the group chat anymore. And so this morning on the way to church, another parent had texted me and said, hey, is Grayson going to this? He needs to get his ticket. They're all doing the back 2 rows. And he didn't know about it because he left the group chat. And so now we're just having that, it's okay that you've left the group chat and you're not in it and things are going on and videos are being sent that you are maybe going to miss out on this. You can decide now because we found out about it, but just having those conversations, because things do come up and arise that don't feel good. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't feel good today going out to middle school and they're going to be talking about the movies and he just found out about it through his mom, because of it. But yeah.
It's pretty difficult. Sometimes, the point that you're making, Kelly, I know you do have a do-over because you have younger kids going in, so you can learn from some of the things that you did or did not do with the older kids. And I know one thing we've learned is, we really talked to Jeremiah about being the light, and we really go into in depth of what that means, being a light. And we talk about how when Jesus prayed, he said, I pray not that you take them out of this world, but they will be guided by my word as they live in this world, and others will be able to see me in them. So the whole thing with Jeremiah is, the light attracts people. It will attract people to you. So as long as you're doing the right thing at the right time, you're having empathy and compassion and concern for others, don't worry, you will have friends. You will feel more confident about yourself. You will love yourself more. And we just try to help him understand too that he came home the other day and said something about he's going to this other Christian camp during the summer, and they talked about how to get to heaven, and his whole focus was how to get to heaven. And we said, okay, that's great, but you know what? The kingdom of heaven is here on earth. We have to live in the kingdom. So we talk about the Beatitudes and all of those things, just being able to be confident about yourself, do the right thing, be a light in this world, because you will never be taken out of this world from, until Jesus returns or until you die. But while you're here, you need to really learn those principles, those godly principles of really what it means to be a light in this world. And I know there's sometimes, like you said, we've had to do the same thing with our older kids. They have to come off of some of these group chats or some of the social media things, but also we have to teach them too, but that, you know what, you take one thing away, something else pops up, something else comes up, another group starts here, or just a group of kids in person at school. So how are you going to navigate through that? So we talk a lot about just being the light, and really what does that mean in real life form, everyday school life, when you go to school every day.
And I just also wanted to add, it might be a little bit harder at a middle school level or, even the high school level, but showing them, okay, we may not go to these parties with the people in the neighborhood because there's drinking involved, but, how do we as Christians come together and have a good time? And, we just had Anaya, who got married, had a fantastic, phenomenal reception. No alcohol was involved. And, after all was said and done, we were talking to some of the attendants, and they were saying, this was one of the best weddings that we have ever seen that actually happened. And, everything was clean. There was no one getting drunk. There was no drama. And we genuinely had a good time. And so for kids to understand, you can have fun without all of that nonsense. And, really finding some families that you can connect with and you can, really spend time with and you can have a good time with. And so that the kids can really see that real time, we're not doing all that, but we're still having a good time. And, to the point about this is some of the things happening with the church kids. Still, even within.
Zero issues in the youth. Zero.
Well, from our other congregation.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Referring to the other congregation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But showing them, it's okay for you to even be set apart from the nonsense that goes on within, some of the church activities. So, and that's okay. But like you said, we just, if you at a young age can instill in them, really what it likes to, what it's like to, be like Jesus and like you said, be a light. Just that is who you are. People are going to be attracted to you, and to just, that is really what we emphasize.
Another example kind of came to mind for Grayson, at least in middle schools. We constantly ask him to be different. We've said that a bunch. But what we specifically ask him is when somebody else is being made fun of, that I want you to go help them and go stick up for them. And he's gotten himself into a couple of awkward moments where, and I'm not promoting a fight or anything like that, but it almost got to that level because these two boys were messing with this girl, and Grayson, I was so proud of him. He told them to stop and, kind of helped her out. But that's an example is you can't be with that crowd, and be different. You're either with them or you're not. And so when we've asked him to be different, we ask him to not be a part of that crowd. And so he's she's talked a lot about just, don't make fun of, don't go with the group, be different by sticking up for them. And he's so far done that.
And it does start in kindergarten too, because you talked about like the kindergartner. And I always tried to watch and look and make our kids do things that they were uncomfortable with. I never let them back down because it was something that was going to be embarrassing or something that was going to make them uncomfortable. If it was the right thing to do, I held them to that standard. And I tried to find situations where they did have to go and be different and stand up. And oftentimes, I wanted to say, Steve, you're talking about being the light. It usually feels good to be the light. Like at first, you don't think it's going to feel good. At first, it's hard. But when you're done with it, you actually do. And so letting our kids see that doing the right thing actually does feel good most of the time.
Our plan for next week is really just to have about 15 minutes of content and then spend more time doing this. So if there's anything in particular that you want to make sure that we talk about next week, please send me an email at matt@ccmcdermott.org, and we'd love to do that. So thank you guys so much for being here again this week. So have a great week.